Get higher, baby. Get higher, baby. Get higher, girl. Hey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Knights of the Pages Library. We are a little podcast dedicated to reviewing audiobooks. I am Bo Knight, and as always, I'm joined by my brother, Ryan Knight. And today we are taking a look at Such Wicked Intent by Kenneth Oppel and narrated by Luke Daniels.
That's right. This is the second book in the Apprenticeship of Victor Frankenstein series, the second and last book.
Oh, yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah, so this is still part of our sequels month, as it were. So this is the follow-up to This Dark Endeavor, also by Kenneth Oppel. So
Yeah. And this is, never mind. I'll talk about it later, I guess.
yeah, so before we get too deep into it, if anybody has any thoughts on this book or any other book that we've done, feel free to email us. kotpl.pod@gmail.com is by far the easiest way to get a hold of us.
Yeah, we would love to see some emails at some point.
Sure. But we still love you, Brian. We still love you.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying not to talk about you every episode.
So yeah, this book, let's see, looks like it was written back in 2012. This one came out in 2012, so it's getting some years under its belt.
Honestly, I thought it was older than that.
Yeah, 2012, so 9 years old. So Kenneth Oppel, we've talked about this before. See, and now too, I keep saying Oppel because that's how they say it on some of them, but I noticed on this one they say Opal.
I think it is Oppel though.
Okay.
I think could be
If
totally wrong.
If somebody knows, email us and let us know how to say it.
Yeah, because on Airborne they say Oppel.
Yeah, exactly.
And in this one they say Opal.
Sure.
I don't know.
Either way, we've talked about this before. Kenneth Oppel is mostly known for kind of writing like they're more like, I'm not gonna say that they're children's books, but they're more like teenager style or aimed at that kind of age group, I think.
Yeah. Well, they're mostly about like 16-year-old boys.
Right. So yeah, that's kind of the demographic I think that a lot of his books are kind of targeting. Because this says like under the categories, this says children's audiobook. I am definitely gonna say this is not for children.
I don't even really like this, especially this book is probably not like this might have messed me up if I listened to it when I was like 14.
Sure. Yeah, this one gets a little bit dark. So but either way, yeah, that's kind of the stuff that Kenneth Oppel is known for. So, and we talked about Luke Daniels before for The Stark Endeavor, but what do you think about him in this one, Bo?
Oh, he's great. He's fantastic. He's a fantastic job.
Yeah, I think Luke Daniels is I would put Luke Daniels up there pretty high on my list of narrators. I think he does an excellent job.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't listened to, I guess, a lot of other books that he's done that haven't been written by Kenneth Oppel.
He has a lot on Audible. Almost 600 titles that he helps narrate. Either he solely narrates or narrates with other people. So yeah, he has a lot of books on Audible that he does.
How's that even possible to do 600 books?
I don't know. That's a ton. I mean, I guess if it's his job, that must be all he does.
Yeah. Well, he's good at it.
Either way, yeah, he is very good at it. So so in this book, Such Wicked Intent is a direct sequel of This Dark Endeavor. It actually starts off pretty much exactly where the first book ended, but the content of the story is much different. So if everybody remembers when in the first book, Victor's brother passes away at the end, and basically the second book is Victor trying to bring his brother back to life, essentially. is what the story is about.
Yeah, kind of.
Which we'll get
It's
into
almost
this.
it's almost about something else, but it's hard to talk about that without spoilers.
Sure, and that's what I'm trying to avoid, is spoiling anything too much. And I kind of see where he was going with this story, since this is supposed to be building up, I'm assuming, towards like the Frankenstein saga of stories. But as we'll come to find out, this is the last book in the series, so it unfortunately doesn't go any further than this.
Yeah, it's a damn shame.
This book clocks in right at 8 hours, so it's pretty short, unfortunately. And you could buy this one for $21 is what I'm seeing.
I'm seeing $20.99, so basically
Okay.
the same thing.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize too that the first book is only 8 hours as well. So these are on the shorter side.
Yeah, I don't feel like they're short though. I feel like they're
I
as
would
long as they
say
need to be.
sure. And I would say there's a lot of story packed into the 8 hours. And I'll talk a little bit more about that once we pass the spoiler wall. So what do you think? Easy to listen to, easy to follow?
I mean, it can get a little complicated, especially there are a lot of like moving parts, I guess, that you kind
Sure.
of need to pay attention to. But the fact that it never breaks from Victor's perspective makes it pretty easy to listen to.
Yeah, I would say that actually makes it a lot easier kind of to follow, is the fact that you are only seeing pretty much through Victor's eyes. Just makes it less jarring, so there's not as much perspective switching or anything like that. This is all told from Victor's perspective. So
Yeah, I mean,
and
I've listened to this a couple times, so it's hard to say. It's like, is it easy to follow? For me, yeah.
good point. Yeah, I think maybe the first time you listen to this, it could be a little bit jarring. But I think overall, because of the way it's told, it's pretty easy to understand kind of what's going on. So,
I agree with that.
So what do you think? What's your recommendation on this one?
I am not going to recommend this.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, because there's so much wasted potential with there not being another book.
Sure.
I feel like there's just a lot of intrigue that happens in this book, and I want to know more, but you can't.
Sure. Yeah, because it ends with this, which is, I mean, it's very unfortunate. So this book is so bittersweet to me.
Yeah,
Because
the book itself is great. I'm not saying that. I'm
Sure.
just saying, like, as me as a listener, like, even I didn't even want to come back to this. Ryan can attest to this. It's
Yeah,
like I didn't really want to do an episode on this because it doesn't go anywhere after this, and it's just a damn shame.
right. I agree with you. It really is, because the first book, like I like the first book more than I like this one.
Really,
But
I think the second book is much better.
see, well, I should just say I like the I think what they're doing in the first book, to me, is so much more grounded. Like, it's so much
Yeah,
more
it's a lot
believable.
more tame.
Sure. And I think that's what I like so much about it. Both of these books, we said this kind of in the first book too, I'm pretty sure, is that these are sort of coming of age stories. And in this second book, it almost is more annoying, if you will. Like, I mean, we'll get into this after the spoilers, but literally some of the stuff they're doing, and then he's like, and I realized Elizabeth was looking at Conrad and it made me jealous. I'm like,
And
dude, you
yeah,
are a fucking spirit right now, and that's what you're thinking about? Like, come
well,
on.
it does make sense though.
He writes it in very well for why those emotions take over. However, at some point I'm just like, oh my God, we get it, Victor. Jeez, you got a boner. Come on.
Yeah, Elizabeth must be super pretty.
I guess. I agree with you though. I think this one is hard to recommend for the sole fact that it is the end of the series that I think could have been such a good series.
Yeah, and it even like ends on like a teaser of like something else to come, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh fuck you.
Exactly. For sure. And that's, yeah, it's just very disappointing. So I agree. yeah, it's hard to recommend for the sole fact that it's good, but you don't get any more, and you don't get a good closing point. So
And there is just so many like hooks just laying around in this book. And
yeah,
it's like, oh man, where's he gonna go with this? And it just
sure.
there's no more.
Yeah, almost to a weird point. Like even right off the bat, we're gonna get into it. Oh, you just want to pass the spoiler wall? Let's just
Yeah, let's just go
let's
past the
just
spoiler wall.
do it. Okay, so for anybody, if this is your first time here in our podcast, which hopefully it's not, you should know that when we pass the spoiler wall, we're just gonna talk about the story. So we're gonna ruin it basically if you haven't heard it. So if you want to listen to it, go back and listen to the book, and then come back here afterwards and listen to what we have to say about it.
Yeah.
So, like I said, this book opens up directly where this Dark Endeavor left off. They are taking out all the books out of the Dark Library, and his father is having them all burned. They're having the Dark Library sealed up because, he thinks that everything in there is basically just, it's all bad news.
Right. And he's kind of covering his own tracks, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah, because his father also, if you remember from the first one, dabbled in alchemy to rip other people off, essentially.
Yeah. To basically keep their family in opulence.
Alphonse Frankenstein. That's
his name?
Yeah.
He's barely mentioned in this one.
No, he's not. He's in the first one a lot, but he's not hardly in this one.
In this one, they're barely kids.
That's a good point, actually. I mean, and there's also a ton of spots in this book where they which is fine. He kind of skips over like the things they're doing in the real world, if you will.
Yeah.
Everything pretty much centers around this when they go to the spirit world. So, but so Victor is obviously helping his dad burn all these books, and it's the next day, right after all this stuff smoldering, that he finds the metal book.
Yeah, he sees it out of his window. It's like a glint of something.
Right. So in the pile of all these burned ashes and this burned stuff, he sees what looks like a book that's still intact, which he's like, what kind of book can't burn? So he goes and he grabs it and he burns his hands because it's actually a metal case. It's not a book.
Yeah, and he doesn't need a key, right? He can just open it, and inside are this weird clock, this thing that looks kind of like a key, these plans to make like a pendulum,
yep,
and this weird elixir. And there's a note in there too, right? About how to use the elixir.
About how to use, is it how to use the elixir? I think you're right. Or no. Is that
no,
that's all in the room?
That's all upstairs, yeah.
The elixir's not even in there, right? The elixir's in the room. It's
yeah,
just,
all
this
all
is
that's
just
in
the
there
pendulum.
And the key.
Right. The
up.
key, yes, the key and the pendulum. And then it might be plans on how to make the pendulum. I just like when Victor's building it and he's like, I was very pleased with myself because the plans were required to be incredibly precise. It's like, dude, if it's just a pendulum thing that you set up, don't you think they would already be made to the things that, like the measurements?
I don't know. I guess I didn't even think about that.
I don't know. I'm just being an asshole to Victor.
But it's it's a pendulum that can swing in all four directions, right?
Yeah, so it has a like a universal joint at the top, so which allows the pendulum, when you let it go, it might not always swing straight back and forth. It kind of swings in different directions each time, and we'll come to find out why that is here in a minute.
Yeah, and so he like the part of the plans for the pendulum, right? You're supposed to put letters out because it's actually like a spirit pendulum, so it allows you to talk to dead people. So Victor immediately wants to talk to Conrad, and he has Elizabeth help him as he calls out the letters as it goes and goes and goes, and then it spells out "Come raise me" over and over and over and over and over again.
Right.
So Victor assumes obviously it's his brother.
Can we just pause for a second on the fact though that, I mean, nobody is really this is pretty weird. We just built this pendulum and we're talking to dead people. Right away, I was like, that's some seriously high fantasy stuff. And they're just like, oh no, it's not like normal now, you know.
Well, I mean, they kind of blow it off as nonsense to
Yeah,
begin
at
with.
first. Plus, I mean, obviously we as the listener come to find out that it was not Conrad, but how does he know it's not just like some random spirit in the room that's like, you know what I mean?
I don't know. I guess I never really thought about that.
Anyways, I was just getting off on a tangent. Um,
How do they freaking like? One of the things I forgot about this book is like how fast they get into all of this.
that's what I mean. The book it's actually pretty short, and that's what I mean. He finds this thing, he builds the pendulum, he talks to a spirit supposedly. They find the freaking secret room almost
Right, because
immediately after that
because they look at the painting of Victor Frankenstein,
of Wilhelm.
Wilhelm, not Victor. Yeah, right, Victor's. Yeah, and yeah, he's pointing up, like in the chapel, right, or wherever. It looks
Yeah,
like he's pointing up, and so they're able to bring down like a chandelier and then like ride it up, and then up there they use that key that was in that book to open like a special room.
yeah, there's
that he
like a
had
room
hidden.
up, yeah, hidden up above the chapel, which they said not many people in their household are religious, so nobody really visits the chapel very often.
Right. Yeah, it's a very progressive family
Right.
for the time.
Isn't that weird too? Like, why would Wilhelm Frankenstein have a picture of himself pointing at the, like, in case he
Well,
forgot where it was?
I guess it was like, I guess, like as a contingency plan.
Maybe in
I
case he
don't
was like on his deathbed and he had to tell somebody how to find it, he could just say like, "Look at my self-portrait."
know, but I mean like in case he got lost in the spirit world, I think.
Maybe.
I don't know. Cuz see there's so many things in this book like that I'm like, "Oh man, what the hell was that about?"
Right. Yeah, I don't know, man. So Elizabeth, Victor, and Henry.
Conrad. Oh yeah, Henry. Conrad's his brother.
Yeah, Henry Clerval, their friend. They go up to this little secret room, and what they find is like there's like a little bed in there. This is where he finds the spirit clock and the elixir and the instructions on how to enter the spirit realm. So right away, Victor's like, "Oh, I got to go in the spirit world because I got to go find Conrad," because he assumes Conrad is the one saying, "Come raise me." So basically, what happens is he drinks this elixir, which, you know, what an amazing thing this is. And
Yeah, we never really get to learn more about it.
no, which he sort of writes that into the book because Victor mentions that they probably could have made more of the spirit elixir, but it was probably in the dark library that
I thought at the one point he figures out how to make more and then nothing comes of it.
You're absolutely right, because he says, "I can't look in my own world." You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
So Victor drinks this elixir, and he holds his talisman, which is his ring, and he enters the spirit world, which basically he closes his eyes and he opens them again, and he's in the same spot, but Henry and Elizabeth are not there with him, and everything seems a little different when he wakes up. And he also realizes now that this little clock that he's holding, which looks like it has like bird legs instead of just regular ticking hands, is now moving while he's inside there. And in the instructions, it specifically says you cannot stay in there any longer than the spirit clock allows you to.
Yeah.
So once he's in the spirit world, though, he's still in their house. So he goes and he finds Conrad in this house. And Conrad can hardly look at Victor because apparently Victor is like super bright with light. Like he looks like an angel almost.
Yeah.
Is what I kind of picture. And he's radiating heat. We should mention that too. It becomes kind of important. But either way, he does find his brother. So yeah, he did go to the spirit world. He found his dead brother. And now all he wants to do is, now he knows Conrad's spirit is there, so he wants to find a way to raise him from the dead and bring him back to the real world.
Yeah, and they just talk for a little bit, and I think we see a couple butterflies,
I think you're right. Yeah, at this point,
and we
these
meet. Oh God, what the hell is her name?
um, I'll think of it. Either way, we meet. There's another girl there in the house,
Yes, that's what
Annalisa.
yeah, and Conrad has like a sword, which is super weird that he feels really unsafe in the house. But we don't get to really hear much about it because the spirit clock ticks super fast and Victor has to leave after seeming to be there for only a couple minutes.
Right. So then basically what he has to do then is he has to run back to where his real body was and get back in the same position, which he sort of talks about how he can feel his talisman leading him back to his body. But the house starts changing once the spirit clock starts tapping the glass. So some of the walls change and some of the paintings are different, some of the corridors are different, and basically we find out that it's the house going through different states that it has been in for the 300 years or more that it's been built.
Yeah, and Victor can like change the shape of it with his mind.
Right. Yeah, he has some control over things. Like he thinks really hard. He's like, "Show me the way," and like all of a sudden like a passageway opens up in front of him leading to where he needs to go.
So yeah, but he makes it back and he gets back and he tells Elizabeth and Henry about what he saw, and they kind of think he was just hallucinating, like he's full of shit.
Right.
But he can't go back into the spirit world again today because you can only go in once per day. And then the next day, right, they find like those caves underneath their house.
Yeah, the caves and the caverns are where the dark library was. There was like a well in there.
Right, because
And
didn't some servant like accidentally fall down the stairs or some shit and like knock open a pathway or something like that?
well, they were gonna seal up the well, but the guy like threw something in there to start filling it up. They threw like some stones
Oh,
in
that's
and they
right. And it
broke
just
out
broke
like a
the
false
bottom part.
bottom. Yeah. So then they knocked them all out and they used a ladder and they climbed down there and they found out there's a bunch of caves below the Frankenstein manor.
Yeah, and they go check them out and they have like weird like they have like a language on the walls, like they can tell just by like all the variety of characters that there's like a language that these people spoke.
Right.
But they don't have any drawings of what they were. Like they don't have any there's nothing that looks like a person or anything like that. Like
Right.
and they find that really strange.
Yeah.
But they don't go very far because the caves are like massive and they don't want to get lost.
Right. And so then their father says he's going to call in an expert, basically.
Yeah, because he's a super studious man.
But so basically, they want to find out if Victor was hallucinating or not. So they decide that Elizabeth and Victor will both go into the spirit world, and they'll go together, or they'll at least take the elixir together and see what they experience.
Right, and they'll come back without talking, write down their experience, and
Right.
Henry will read them and see how close they are to each other.
Yeah. So they end up both taking the elixir and going back into the spirit world. They both awaken there together, like, Victor knew they would. And then they both go and find Conrad again. And this is where we really start to get that, like, when Victor's in the spirit world, he's very like his emotions and his freaking testosterone is all just like amped up to 11.
Yeah, he's
'Cause, like,
super cocky too.
Yeah, and he can hardly look at Elizabeth without just wanting to like ravish her.
Yeah. And we should mention Elizabeth is like his sister, kind of. It's kind of weird to me.
She's
They,
a
like,
distant
grew up-
relation
I
to
know,
him.
but they like grew up together though.
Yes,
Like
they grew up in the same
kind
house.
of a
Yeah.
sister.
Yeah,
weird to me.
I would call her, his sister. So yeah, it is kind of bizarre. So then this is where too they go in, and this is the first time, right, that Victor notices all the fog outside the house.
Yeah.
And
Annalise tells them not to go open any doors, open any windows,
right,
because that's an evil spirit.
exactly.
And I
Um,
think this is when a butterfly touches on Victor, right? And he's able to slow the spirit clock a little bit.
yes.
We
Yep.
don't know why, but these butterflies, when they land on you, kind of like amplify all of your abilities.
Right. And we should mention too, they start out pure black, except with like blue spots that look like eyes on their wings.
Mhm.
And then when they touch Victor, they like alight with color.
Yeah, it like
They,
radiates out through their wings, is the way I
right.
picture it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it lands on him, he notices like it sharpens all his senses and it just makes him better, basically.
Yeah, but they don't really accomplish much this time, if I remember right.
No, because they end up having to go back pretty quickly.
Well, yeah, and then when they go back, Victor like grabs Elizabeth's hand and they just start like making out.
Yeah, they start like making out right before they lay back down in their respected positions, and then they wake up in the real world.
Yeah, and then they both write their accounts, and it's weird to me the detail they're both finished at the same time, and then Henry
Yep.
reads them, and then Henry's like, yeah, they're all pretty much the same except for Elizabeth seems. At the end of yours, it says Victor was confused.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
So that's when they decide they're like, okay, so the spirit world is real. It's not a hallucination. And then if I remember right, this is when the first time that the dude shows up, the
yeah,
scientist guy,
Mhm.
to go start looking through the caves. And he basically, yeah, he's like, this is insane. You know, you guys found this basically what is probably from an ancient civilization,
Mhm.
right below your house.
And then Victor decides, right? He's like, if there's a way to raise Conrad, it would be in the dark library. If we go into the spirit world, we can look at the dark library at any time, like that it existed.
Yeah, because
All
it
those
shouldn't
books are
be
not
destroyed.
burned.
Right, exactly. So they also decide too that they can all three go in, right? Henry, Elizabeth, and Victor at the same time.
Yeah, to cover more ground, right?
Yeah. So they end up going in and they go and they find the dark library and they start trying to look through all the books. And Victor realizes that if a butterfly lands on him, these black butterflies, and if it stays on him, he can read books like insanely fast. Like he can literally just flip the pages and he can read other languages as well as understand the entire book in a few seconds.
Yeah, and the butterfly is like pushing him towards information he thinks he would need, and
Right.
he like quickly realizes he's like, oh man, whatever the information we need is not in here. We got to go down in the caves so I can read those people's writings.
Right. Yeah, because is this the first part where he gets the vision of like having to
Mhm.
make a body?
Yeah, it
Is
happens
it this
really
first?
early on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I
so he
think
goes
you're
down
right.
and they like look at the cave paintings, and he's not necessarily reading them. He's getting like a vision in his head. And these people, actually, it doesn't even really say if they're people. He just like sees hands, and they like make a mud baby essentially, and then they take a piece of bone and they attach some sort of like some black liquid itself comes out of a bottle and attaches to the bone,
Mm-hmm.
and they put it in this mud thing, and then the mud thing they leave it alone, and the mud thing grows on its own,
Into a
and
body.
yeah, into a new host essentially.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sure.
And so yeah, Victor pretty much immediately realizes like that's the way they'll bring back Conrad.
Right. And I think it's this time too. I can't remember, but either way, he figures out how to slow the spirit clock down like a lot.
Oh yeah, it is this time.
But because they went so far, he realized if he's not focusing on keeping the clock slow, it will speed back up. So then they have to leave shortly after he figures out all of this, how that they need to make the body basically for Conrad.
Right. And so then the next day they're sailing, and Victor's like, okay, we know how to bring Conrad back, but what was that black liquid? Like maybe we can go in the dark library and figure out how to make that. But then he's manning the rudder on the boat, right? And Henry's like, whoa, like what's that on your hand? And he's like, oh, that's just a shadow, because he's missing 2 fingers from trying to make the elixir of life to save his brother.
Right.
But
Which
it
we should
looks like his
mention
fingers are back.
they're whole when he's in the spirit world.
Oh yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
It's a minor detail, but yeah.
but it looks like his fingers are back, and he moves his hand into the light, and this like black thing like crawls away and hides in the shadow. And
it's like on his skin. It's like attached to his skin.
Yeah, it's like I just imagine like some black ooze that like moves around insanely fast.
Yeah, so it immediately tries to like go under his clothing because he realizes once he puts it in the sun, it tries to find like a dark spot. So they end up catching it in a bottle, right? And it is one of the butterflies, basically. It stayed attached to Victor when he left the spirit world, and so now it is in the real world.
But they figure out that's what they need to bring Conrad back. Like that's what they need to put into the mud baby.
Right. Victor also realizes when he has one of these on him in the real world, he operates at a much higher level in the real world also. Not as high as in the spirit world, but he's on like a whole nother level in the real world.
We should also mention that Victor got checked out by a doctor, and the doctor was like, "You are extremely pale. You've lost a lot of weight. Like, what's going on? Like, how's your sleep?" He's like, I sleep great. I don't know what you're talking about. I feel amazing." He's like, "Well, you look like shit."
Right. Yeah, that's true. So then they end up going back to the spirit world, and I think it's this time because they tell Conrad they can make him a new body. Everybody's excited, right? So this is when they like sing and dance. Yeah. And then Victor and Henry fight, right?
Oh yeah, they get in a fight.
Yeah, and Henry whips the shit out of him because Henry Henry is a boxer, and so at first they say they're gonna fence, but Henry knows that Victor's really good at fencing, and Henry can't beat him, so he's like, "These are not the rules," and Victor's like, "Make up your own." So he throws Henry throws his
foil down and punches him in the face.
And then that's when he's like, "I've been taking boxing lessons." And basically, though, when they're in the spirit world, because Henry is also like 16 years old, so these are a bunch of 16-year-old kids, and their like I said, their emotions and their freaking their juices are freaking flowing when they're in the spirit world at a high intensity. So their testosterone is like through the roof, and Henry really likes Elizabeth as well. So now they just want to fight over her, basically.
Yeah. Is this too when the fog gets in?
I think so. Yeah, when Elizabeth accidentally, quote unquote, opens the door.
Yeah. So yeah, she accidentally opens the door, and that white fog comes in. And
because I should mention it's because Elizabeth is mad that Conrad is dancing with Annalisa.
Right.
But they don't have a choice because Conrad can still not get close to any of the other people because there's too
not
hot.
Even within like 20 feet.
Yeah. So that's why he's dancing with Annalisa, because he can't get close to Elizabeth. But Elizabeth is still jealous. So
that white fog comes in and grabs Annalisa and like starts shaking her all over the place, but it's not messing with anybody else. And Conrad tries to kill it, but he can't even hurt it. And then Victor just comes over and like stabs the shit out of it, and it like ends up dissipating and going away.
Yeah, they like cut, because it comes in kind of like a tentacle, and they cut the tentacle off basically. And yeah, then it lets go of Annalisa. Victor thinks he notices something strange about her appearance when she lands, but then she like looks normal right after that. So he just assumes it's no big deal. We should mention it's a minor detail again, but she's wearing like a solid black dress. And that's the part that he thought he saw, like the visage of it kind of slipped when the fog had a hold of her. But then like afterwards, he just assumed he imagined it because then she looks normal.
I guess we should mention too that Annalise, like her backstory is that she was just like help that was at the house that died.
Oh yeah, sure. And she hadn't been gathered yet. That's what the story she tells.
Which they never get into the gathering at all.
No,
they don't even talk about it.
No, they don't.
Which bothers me.
So shortly after this, they go back to the real world. The whole time this has been going on, the doctor dude has been down like in the caves learning stuff about the caves and about the beings that inhabited it. And this is where they find the bones, right?
I don't think that they make the baby first.
Oh yeah.
They don't
Okay,
find the
you're right.
bones almost till the end.
Okay. Um. Okay, yeah. So Victor and Henry and Elizabeth go out and they make this mud baby, and they have a brush of Conrad's, an old
Yeah,
brush
they
with
use
his
some of
hair.
his hair.
Yeah, so they mix Conrad's hair with the butterfly, and they put it into this little mud baby thing that they make out in like a, I don't know where it's at. It's like a shack that's on their property.
Yeah, yeah, it's like abandoned though, right? Because they don't have workers using it.
Right. So they make this little mud baby out there, and then they have to leave it out there because it's gonna take some time to grow. Um, and so then they come back, they go again, and they tell Conrad that they did it. The body's growing. We kind of just you get a little bit of filler at this part because they're just waiting on the body to grow, basically.
But there are a couple times Victor goes by himself and just looks in the dark library.
Right. Yeah, because when he's in there and he can read with the butterflies on, he can read and cover a lot of ground. So he's just looking for all kinds of stuff in the dark library.
And he goes in and purposely collects butterflies too. Like because like now when he goes in, he gets like one or two immediately latch onto him, and he usually already has one on him at all times.
Right. We should say too that these butterflies will like land on them, him and Elizabeth and Henry, and then they fill with color, and then they sometimes will leave and then just kind of disappear throughout the house.
We should mention too the time that I'm talking about when he goes back by himself. They go down in the pits because Conrad had been hearing a weird like moaning, and they go down and they find like this body that's looks like I imagine like it looks like
a
a
cocoon,
rock.
right?
Yeah, it looks like
Yeah.
a rock with like a outline of a human body on the inside,
Uh-huh.
and it appears to be like getting stronger, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And is this where he sees what the butterflies are doing?
That doesn't happen quite yet.
Okay. Yeah, because so they find this in the spirit world though, and then after they come back out of the spirit world is when the doctor tells them, right, that he had found the same thing in the real world.
Yeah,
This is when they find,
whatever it was a god.
yeah, because it was like he hands like Victor a piece of a bone and he's like, "Oh my gosh, this looks like it was huge." And that guy's like, "Yeah, and it's just part of the skull."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we don't quite find out what that is until right up towards the end. So then they go back and check on the mud baby, right? And it's like it's grown a lot. Like it surprises Victor that it's the size of like a 3-year-old child now.
And it's just sleeping.
And it's just sleeping, but it's moved. So Elizabeth is like, "Oh, we got to put it back where it was." And Victor's like, "Don't touch it." In the vision, nobody messed with the body. And she doesn't listen to him. She touches it anyways, and then it wakes up. And so she's like, "We got to feed it." And she basically starts taking care of it like it's a normal baby, even though it's just like a spirit baby, shell of a baby.
Do you think like all the stuff with the mud baby wouldn't have happened if she wouldn't have touched it?
Yeah, actually I do.
You think it would have just laid there the whole time?
I think so. That's what I envision. Yeah. Because I think that was the point of like the ritual, is that this thing will just grow on its own, asleep and inert, until it's ready to have, be the host. Because it's supposed to be like what you said, it's waiting for a host, basically.
Yeah, it's just a shell.
Exactly. So yes, I think it would have just grown by itself without having any interaction.
And this is when the book starts to get so creepy.
Super creepy. Super dark.
They go to check on the baby again, and it had moved, and there is just like blood all over the place.
Yeah.
And the baby is sleeping, and like around its mouth is like blood and fur and just all sorts of like viscera, and all over the cottage are just like smashed rats and squirrels and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
yeah, because it's just been catching things that come in there and eating them.
Yeah. And they feed it, and it seems to like Elizabeth, but it doesn't like Victor.
Yeah, and we should mention the next time they come back. So it went from like a mud baby to like a 3-year-old, and then the following time now it's like a 7 or 8-year-old. Like it
Mhm.
grows about 3 years every day.
Yeah.
And then they end up going back and forth to the spirit world several times, telling Conrad how it's going, that his body's growing good and all
I
this
think
stuff.
I think the next time they go, Victor's planning on going by himself, but then he fell asleep, and he was gonna go right at midnight, but he fell asleep, and he notices that somebody broke into his room and took the spirit clock and the elixir.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes and he finds out it was Elizabeth, so he follows her into the spirit world, and she's just there talking with Conrad, hanging out.
Right.
But she's trying to convince Conrad that Annalise is evil too,
Yeah, the whole time. Yeah, that's right. Because
she tells Conrad,
Elizabeth's
she's like,
jealous.
I looked up the registry of all the people who've worked in the house for the last like 500 years, and there was nobody by the name of Annalise.
Right.
Oh, and we should mention too that they wanted to make a body for Annalise, but she like flat out refused.
Yeah, she refused because she said she will be gathered when the time is right.
And she didn't want them to desecrate her grave.
Right. Which we will find out in a little while why that is.
I think this is the time when Victor stumbles across, in the spirit world, he stumbles across more of Wilhelm Frankenstein's notes, and he sees like a suit made out of butterflies, like essentially like stitched together to make like a garment that you would wear.
Right. We should also mention too that they realize Wilhelm Frankenstein's painting in the real world, after they've been going to the spirit world now, they realize that in the painting, in his self-portrait, it's like him and he's painting himself in the picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a self-portrait of him making a self-portrait. But where he's pointing, where they thought he was pointing, like, which that's what it kind of was, is that he's pointing to the spot in the chapel, but he's also pointing at the painting of himself, and they realize he's not holding the paintbrush, but black butterflies are holding the paintbrush in his self-portrait.
So they helped him paint.
Right. And they realized that Wilhelm Frankenstein had been coming to the spirit world and using all of these tools as well.
And we should mention that nobody knows what happened to Wilhelm Frankenstein. He just like rode off in the middle of one night for no reason.
Yeah, he just got on his horse and he left. So nobody knows what happened to him.
And yeah, that was like 300 years ago too.
Right.
And this is where Victor sees the butterflies leave him and go down into the caves and transfer that color into the monster.
Right. It lands on like this cocoon. The color drains from it and it turns black. And briefly, the cocoon thing is like illuminated as if light is coming from inside of it. And Victor can see like a terrible sort of silhouette inside of it.
And Victor tries to convince them. I was like, okay, that mud baby thing is not what we thought it was. We need to get rid of it. Like, that's not going to be a good option to bring Conrad back.
Right. Especially because one of the times they go back to see the mud baby and it's like 14 or 13 or 14 looking years old, he realizes it has a strange tooth because they show up at the cottage and there's teeth all over the floor because this thing lost all of its baby teeth in one night and grew a full mouth of adult teeth. And one of its teeth has like 4 points on it. Like I imagine basically like if you had a molar, but at the front of your mouth, and if all 4 points were super sharp.
Yeah, and it looks just like the tooth that the doctor had found in the caves.
Right. It also now though looks very much so like Victor and Conrad. Victor realizes, so Victor is like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see myself in this thing. And is this the part where they take it to like the lake and take it out on like a picnic?
Elizabeth is eating with it by herself, and that's when Victor shows up and sees it like trying to rape her.
Yeah, that's right.
and he like knocks it off her, and Henry's there, and he had been on the side of the mud baby. He's actually like really good with it the whole time, but he shows up and helps Victor, and he's like, yeah, something is wrong with that thing. And then it starts to wrestle Victor, and they fall in the water, and it basically tries to drown Victor just by like trying to save itself.
Right. Yeah, like
It
any
doesn't know how to
drowning
swim.
person would do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they try to climb on the closest thing to them, which happens to be Victor. Um,
And we
and
should
Victor,
mention too, at this point, Victor's no longer using the butterfly, so he's like really lethargic because he doesn't know how
right.
to like function without them.
Yeah. Um, so Victor knocks the mud baby off of him, and the mud baby drowns in
Yeah.
the lake.
And Elizabeth is pissed.
Yeah, Elizabeth assumes he killed it, like on purpose, even though he
Mhm.
says it wasn't on purpose, but it does drown. So that body is now dead.
And Elizabeth wants him to make another one, but like Victor flat out refuses. He doesn't think that's a good idea. Neither does
Yeah,
Henry.
because Victor is starting to put two and two together, and he realizes that as this thing is awakening in the spirit world, it just is strange that this body in the real world was showing similar things to that body in the spirit world.
Yeah. And so that night, Victor like wakes up and he realizes something is wrong, and somebody had broken into his room again and taken his stash of butterflies, and Conrad's hairbrush.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go, and Elizabeth is sleepwalking, and she had made another mud baby. She used the hair and a bone from the pit to make this one though, and this one is much larger.
Yeah, like from the get-go, right?
And I don't remember how they end up, because they fight this thing. It's like articulate and smart like right away.
Yeah, because isn't it already? Yeah, it's like the size of like a 10-year-old or something like that.
It's much bigger.
Right. I don't remember how they get rid of it either.
They set it on fire.
Yes, that's exactly what they do, because that's right. He like knocks a candle over onto like a blanket, and he throws like the burning blanket over this thing, and it burns it. That's right.
Yeah, and then they realize that Elizabeth has had a butterfly on her this whole time, because she'd been
Right.
kind of acting strange the whole time. And we should mention too, as they go back and forth between the spirit world, Conrad is noticing that their light is not as bright anymore, especially Victor's.
Right.
So yeah, Elizabeth had a freaking butterfly on her the whole time too. That's why she was acting crazy.
Yeah, and this is where they get like weirded out by what's going on. So they go back to the spirit world, and
Well, Victor goes back by himself.
right, but isn't this the part? Yeah, that's right, because this is the part where he's like telling Conrad, he's like, no, get these things away from me. They're evil. They're trying to steal my life force or whatever. And
Right.
Conrad's like, dude, you're acting really weird. But then one does land on him, right? And
Well, first he shows up to give Conrad his body.
that's right. He tells Conrad to go ahead and take his body. That's right.
And then Conrad doesn't do it. And then he's talking to Annalise again, and like a swarm of butterflies come and land on him and take all of his life force away.
She's like, that's strange. It's like all of your light has gone out.
Mm-hmm. And
then she
immediately
punches him in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She immediately punches him in the face and takes his ring, and then like rips off her dress, which was like that butterfly dress that he had seen in the
Wilhelm.
Yeah.
In Wilhelm's thing.
Yeah. And it's Wilhelm Frankenstein the whole time.
Right.
And he explains to Victor that the same thing had happened to him, that he had been going to the spirit world too much, and somebody had taken his body away from him too.
Yeah. 300 years before.
And so Wilhelm Frankenstein goes back to the real world in Victor's body, but Victor can still see through his eyes.
Yeah, like if he closes his eyes in the spirit world, he can see through Wilhelm's eyes in the real world.
As this is happening, though, they can hear that monster wake up down in the pits.
Yeah, because whatever life force it took from Victor at the end was enough to finally awaken this thing.
Yeah.
So then Victor and Conrad are like, well, now we got no choice. And they go to the armory and they gather up all this shit. And then they go to the chapel, right? Because they're going to go up to the secret room and try to hide from this thing.
And like as Victor's watching through his eyes, and Wilhelm Frankenstein is like, yeah, Conrad never wants to see you again, Elizabeth. He said you're a real bitch, actually. It's really got really dark at the end.
Yeah, it really does.
And then she's like, I don't believe you. I want to talk to him. And he's like, oh, okay, here's the vial of elixir. And he goes to give it to her, but he accidentally doesn't accidentally, but he drops it on purpose. It shatters on the floor. But he didn't know that Elizabeth has her own little store that she took from the bottle.
Right.
But
yeah,
she
what
like
does
immediately
he say that what I can't remember what he says that tips them off 100% that they're like, this is not. Oh, that's right, because they were like, don't worry, we can go back to the spirit world and make some more. And Wilhelm's like, no, that would be impossible or something like that. And then
yeah.
Henry knocks his ass out because he's like, Victor would never say something like that.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, that would be impossible. And why would we want to go there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they
and then
immediately
Henry
figure it
friggin'
out.
punches his lights out.
Yeah. And so they forcibly bring him back.
Yeah, because like you said, Elizabeth had her own little. She had basically taken half of the vial from the beginning and kept some for herself. That's how she was going to the spirit world by herself.
Yeah. And so they go back, and they
were like, they're like, we thought it was Annalise, but then we got here and it was weird because it was Wilhelm Frankenstein.
and that monster like gets up, and they fight it for a while. Like Henry does most of the fighting because he's never had a butterfly on him, so he's actually
they've like stolen him, right? Stolen some of his light, but he's never purposely let them land on him.
Right. And he ends up doing most of the fighting, which this
And
thing is like, how do you even describe this thing?
I was gonna let you go for it, man. Yeah, I basically picture like a human, but it has like one of its legs is like a clubbed foot. Like it looks in my mind like a tree branch that.
Yeah,
You know what
I
mean?
imagine like a scarecrow kind of.
Yeah, because it also so like a Jack Skellington head
Yeah,
with no
exactly.
eyes. Yeah. It's like a perfectly round head with no eyes, but a huge mouth that runs sort of diagonally kind of on it. It's super weird looking.
And butterflies are like covering all of its skin.
Yeah, because at first they can't tell what it is because there's all these butterflies are going around it, keeping it safe, basically.
Yeah, and it can command these butterflies like a swarm of things, which is kind of cool. It uses them to do stuff.
Mm-hmm. So it ends up coming up there, and they kind of fight with this thing, and
it takes Victor's talisman and is wearing it.
We should also mention that it talks to Wilhelm Frankenstein, and I love this part because the black butterflies land in Wilhelm's ears to translate for this thing talking.
Yeah, which is like, I want to know more about this. Like, how is he working for this thing?
That's okay. Yeah. So Wilhelm talks to this thing and says, no, of course I was going to go make your body. They found your body in the real world and I was going to use it to bring you back. So that means he's been communicating with this thing the whole time he's been in the spirit world, essentially.
And why is this thing evil?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's one thing I like listening to it again this time. It's like, why is this thing like, it's not even necessarily, it doesn't even really do anything evil, I guess, unless other than stealing their life force.
Maybe too, if it were to get into the real world and it could bring all the black butterflies with it, it would be able to like go to the real world and steal people's spirit like in the real world.
Yeah, but like, what was this thing? Like, that's what I don't understand. It's like, what was its purpose before? Like, and why is it entombed in freaking Castle Frankenstein?
Yeah, I don't. You got me, man. And
that's what I mean. There's like
we'll
so many things.
Know.
It's like, and like, how was Wilhelm talking to it in the first place? Why was he letting it steal his life force?
Right.
That's what I don't understand.
And who was it that took Wilhelm Frankenstein's body?
I know. I want to know that too. Who and how did they know how to do that? Because wasn't he the first person to go into the spirit world?
According to the story, he's the first one to ever find out how to go from the real world to the spirit world.
Okay. Anyway, the monster, he's talking to Wilhelm Frankenstein, and it at one part it just gets mad at him and bites his head off.
Yeah, it grabs him and picks him up and just engulfs his head in its mouth and bites his head off. And then
And
it freaking roars triumphantly.
yeah. And so the way they're able to defeat this thing is they open a window and let the fog in.
Which
And
immediately rushes for the creature.
Oh yeah, they like fight, and the fog goes inside of it.
Well, we should mention this thing almost defeats the fog first.
Yeah,
because,
that's true.
like I said, the fog is like tentacles, and this thing's just like ripping tentacles off left and right and throwing them. And then Victor's like, the fog seemed to be, less dense and be weakening. And then that thing like roars in triumph, and while its mouth is wide open, the tentacles just go inside of its mouth, which is fucking metal.
And kill it?
Yeah, because it like freaking explodes.
I know, but it's a spirit.
Yeah, don't ask me, man. I don't know.
Yeah, and then what ends up happening? Conrad they're like, oh, well, what will you do now, Conrad? And he's like, I'm gonna do what I thought I should do immediately, just take a walk.
Yeah, that's right. He's like, I'm gonna go for a walk.
And he just disappears into the fog.
Yeah, and we should mention that the door is open, but the fog outside is no longer like being aggressive. And as Conrad goes outside, it like seems to kind of gently embrace him, and then he just fades into the fog and disappears.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm assuming, what being gathered is.
So the fog was gathering people?
I guess.
So if Wilhelm was keeping it out of the house, why are there not more people hanging out?
I don't know. And see, that's why I thought maybe the house was like purgatory, right?
Yeah.
Like you go to the house right after you die because like that's the last place you were in life, and then you hang out there for a little bit. Maybe that's where you're judged. I don't know. And then the fog is what gathers their spirit and takes it to whatever the next thing is.
What else happens? There's like a little bit more.
They're gonna leave, right? Their dad wants them all to leave.
Yeah.
It started happening earlier, but that's the last thing that they're like getting ready to do is leave Geneva because they're gonna go to like their summer house, because these people are rich as shit. We should mention.
Well, yeah, they're
But I mean that's essentially the end of the book.
We do get the little bit about lightning, like freaking Victor sees some lightning. He's like, oh, what's that? He's like, oh, that's pure energy, my boy.
That's right. Yeah, because his dad is like, that's electricity. It's a very new science. Like we recently have discovered this thing. And that is when Victor has like his idea, and he's like, oh, there's all this energy and electricity. If I could figure out how to harness that, I could, he's still thinking about ways to bring his brother back to life.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but who cares?
Most likely this would have led to like the whole thing you always like in Van Helsing when to awaken the monster, they let the electricity hit him, and shoots into his, that's how they awaken things, is with electricity. I'm assuming that's what this was building towards, but we'll never find out unless, on the off chance Kenneth Oppel hears this and is like, guys, I'm writing the third book right now. Like
I wish. I really do. God. There's so many things I want to know more about this world.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And I think that's why I liked the first book more, and I still do, is because most of the doors that were open in the first one were closed again by the end. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they opened a lot of books into, hey, alchemy is real and you can do real things with it. And they do use it in a way, but they find out you have to be incredibly skilled to do any of it. Like it takes a lot of skill. So not anybody can just throw in a couple things into a freaking cauldron and be like, see, look, I made gold. It doesn't work that way. So it's much more grounded. Whereas this one, within the first like 2 hours, we're in the spirit world. And I was just like, whoa, we're moving fast.
I know, but like, I don't know. I want to know just more about it. Like, could they go in the spirit world somewhere else?
I don't see why not, because all it was is they had to go in the spirit world. Like, it just takes you from where your place in the real world is to where you would go in the spirit world.
So they could just run into other spirits, which is weird that they
I-
don't run into any other ones other than Conrad.
Right. But Conrad is technically only there because Wilhelm wouldn't allow the doors open because the fog was trying to gather him this whole time. And
Yeah, but why wouldn't there be more people there? I guess
yeah, I don't
if he
know.
was
I
keeping
guess.
the fog out for 300 years.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a great point.
And the
Hey, I
fog
don't
doesn't
know.
like him because he was helping the beast thing.
I guess. Or he was just refusing to be gathered, and the fog's like, no, you have to be gathered. That's my only job.
Well, but
I don't know, man.
his spirit dies.
Yeah, and it's killed by technically another spirit.
Yeah, that's essentially a god. I don't know. I don't understand, I guess.
I
So many questions.
agree. And I maybe someday they will be answered, hopefully. But as of right now, this is all we got.
I don't think so. Freaking, it's like 9 years ago this came out. Really think he's got
Yeah.
one cooking this long?
I don't know. He's still writing. I mean, he just came out with the book last year, so he is still writing, obviously. But he came out with the book this year. So yeah, he's still writing actively. So, but maybe he just can't. He opened too many doors on this one, and he's like, I don't even know how to close all these now.
Yeah, maybe he was like, shit.
Yeah, I got in way too deep on this one. But hopefully someday we'll find out.
Yeah, I wish. I hope so.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
like I want to know how he was going to tie all this back into like the traditional Frankenstein story.
right. But as it stands, that is the end of Such Wicked Intent. So, what are we doing next time, Bo?
Next time we're doing a Crossing Swords. I'm doing iRobot, and you're doing, I can't remember what it's called.
I think it's called When the Old Gods Waken, or something
Okay.
to that effect.
Yeah, so
Or the
stay
Old
tuned for
Gods
that.
Waken. Yeah, that should be the next one that's coming out. As always, look forward to more Anime Squires. Those will be coming out too. So
Maybe a round table in there somewhere. I don't know. Stay tuned.
yeah, absolutely. And again, we appreciate anyone and everyone for listening. The only thing we would ask anybody is if you could spare a couple seconds, 5 stars, maybe write a review if you're feeling froggy. Any of that stuff is great. So
Yeah, really appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, feel free to email us about everything. Doesn't even have to be about the podcast. kotpl.pod@gmail.com. That'd be the best way to get a hold of us.
Yeah, you can, like Ryan said, email us about anything. I don't even care.
Yeah, don't try to sell us stuff though.
Yeah, don't do that. That's
Get it?
gross.
Get enough ads on YouTube. So
Yeah,
but
but you
yeah,
could like tell me
so
about your favorite energy drinks. I'd love to hear that.
for sure. Did you see Rain's new flavor is white gummy bear?
What?
Yeah, I haven't
No.
tasted it, but yeah, they have a white gummy bear flavored one.
Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll save that one for a round table. So again, thank you anyone and everyone for listening. We really appreciate it, and we hope to catch you guys in the next episode.